Hello, I'm Craig Seibert,
And I'm Stephen Duenas.
and we're the hosts of Meet Me at the Table. It is a podcast focusing mainly on Christianity and how it's lost its personal connection to the people. But we won't leave the table open to discuss other areas as well. We're going to tackle issues like women in leadership roles in the church, acceptance of those in the LGBTQ plus community, or racial indifferences. And we set the table for all sides to be heard in a respectful manner.
Yes. So today, if you're watching us or if you're listening, you're going to hear a very familiar voice. I'm going to let him fill in why.
Oh, wow. We're starting off
Yeah.
at that. Go ahead.
Again.
Yeah, you guys let me come on to one of your Everyone Has a Story segment, and I got to share my story on why I left the church and kind of dropped the name Christian from my vocabulary to identify myself. And it was a great episode. I loved it. It was very therapeutic to just kind of get that out there and say it publicly. I think that's a really good thing you guys are offering for people to kind of allow them to just say it like out loud, and that's a very therapeutic thing for us to do, I think, sometimes. So it was very good to do that, and I really enjoyed being on it, and I'm glad you guys are letting me come back on once in a while to keep talking. I love talking.
So Stephen, why is Phil in our picture again? Tell us why.
So Phil will be guest hosting here and there. We wanted to be able to bring familiar voices. We really enjoyed that episode. And so again, when we need Phil to fill in the blanks or just to add another voice to the topic, Phil will be joining us. And that kind of brings us to this episode. Lately, we've been very busy, whether it be vacation, work, life, whatever. So we wanted to be able to record one today. And yesterday I was Phil had posted a status, had some great reviews on it. And I chimed in and I made a comment on it, and Phil came back with a great response. And I kind of want to just discuss that because I think it's something, as someone who is deconstructing, that I also sometimes forget. So I'm going to read at least what I had responded with, just to be able to segue what we're discussing. So I'm going to it right now. So there was this whole post, and I find this very common when there are people who are either hurt or just want to post something, that they've left the church and they just want to post something. A lot of times the church, in quotation marks, are very defensive. So my response to this was, the sad thing is that people on this thread are choosing to defend bad behavior rather than hear the hurt and help change the bad system Christians created. Oof. And Phil chimed back with a great response that I was not ready for, because I wasn't expecting it. And when you said that, I was just like, it really took me back and made me think today when I was sitting around just, ADHDing around. And Phil, if you can, kind of say what you said.
Yeah, and I'll give a little context of what the post was. It's from a pastor in Austin, Texas, from Restore Church. I follow him now, and he always has some really good tweets, just kind of challenging some thoughts and stuff that we've been grown accustomed to, that we need to challenge. And he said the vast majority of people walking away from Christianity in America are not rejecting the person and work of Jesus. They are rejecting faulty biblical interpretations that lead to bigotry, oppression, and marginalization. This rejection isn't unchristian, it's Christ-like. And so, as you could probably imagine, I definitely got my fair share of reviews, is how Steve put it. Yeah, so it got raving reviews. So with your comment, and this is something I've been kind of just contemplating in my own head, and how I go about kind of seeing these comments I get from people who are opposing it, and try to that's something I've been trying to do, is just sympathize with where they're at, because we've all been in those situations. We all know where they're at when we hear these things. We've all kind of, I think, thought the same thing, I think, or at least said the same things. And so it's easy for us to sympathize and see where they're coming from, but then also be able to expound on that. So with your comment, I just replied and I said, I agree with you. I also sympathize where they're coming from. When someone criticizes an aspect of their faith, it's easy to get defensive rather than look inside yourself and evaluate if this applies to you or not. Because I remember being taught any criticism towards our faith is just the world slash Satan attacking you or God. So that encourages dismissive behavior rather than self-reflection.
Mm. Yeah, that to me was great, because I think one thing that for me in my deconstructing journey, I do sometimes forget that it wasn't that long ago that I was within that building, also
Right.
defending the very things that I'm posting now, or against the things that I'm posting now. And I think it's trying to find that happy medium of what is my mission as someone who's trying to, is trying to bring people to Christ. Is it to defend the deconstructing community? Is it to defend the church? Or is it just to come in the middle and say, okay, we can somehow bring this together? Now I understand, and this is something that Pastor Amanda Martinez brought up, that I'm in this deconstructing journey where I realize and understand why people are now leaving the church. When they leave the church, it is because of the churches. We got to stop blaming some individuals for the reason why they've left the church. The church has done so much hurt towards people. But I think when you posted that and you responded to me with that, it really resonated to me, because it was like, wow, let me take a step back and get off my own high horse and realize maybe I just need to sympathize with people who are defending this stuff, and go, hey, let's do a one-off conversation. Let's just have this discussion. But I really enjoyed it. Now, Craig, you were not part of this post, but what, from listening to the back and forth on this, what's your thoughts?
You're just going to on the spot. You're like, yeah, tell me your feelings now on the spot.
Unpack this
Yeah,
right
now.
Right.
Just get it out. So a couple of things went through my mind when you were discussing it and talking about the discussion you had back and forth is, before I left, before you left, you don't hear of other people leaving when you're in the church. Like, I don't know if it's masked, like they hide that or shove that down, or if you just don't, you don't realize that person's gone. And I think that of the levels of leaving and the levels of removing myself from the church, I think I'm the earliest or the lowest value compared to us three. I think Stephen, you're about in the middle, and I think Phil, you've kind of realized and come pretty heavy decision to almost remove that Christian moniker from yourself. So I'm kind of at the bottom end of that. But the more and more I listen to people talk about it, and the more and more I realize that there were people that probably left before we heard of this. Before deconstruction was a thing, people left because they were hurt. They just didn't have an outlet for it. They didn't have a way of saying, please don't do this. This is hurting people. Now it seems to be that way. But as you say, if the pendulum swings, and when it swings wide. And, now you've got the deconstruction movement that is just, and you've got people that are swinging way wide and basically, and I don't want to say hating the church, but pretty close. I mean, it's getting pretty close to that, to where they want to separate themselves from both the church and the belief. Yeah. And, how hurt does somebody have to be to do that? Well, we see, Phil, you talked to us about your story. We've talked to other people about their stories and saw, some of those stories were just devastating for me to hear, let alone for that person to actually go through. So I think, if you're talking about that balance, Stephen, you're talking about that balance of still wanting to be part of something, still wanting to carry on what Christ did in his life and kind of walk the way he does, but also steer away from that, collection of people that have rode on their high horse for so long and caused so many pains and hurts with people. Where do you fall in the middle of that? I mean, it's hard to do that, because I think people have been hurt differently. I think people have been hurt at different levels. And I think people have left at different times in their hurt. They've left immediately when they've been hurt. They've left after they've went, oh, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm, I shouldn't be doing that, because like you said, you're in church and they tell you when you question anything, you're questioning religion and faith. That's bad. So maybe they're in the middle of that. They're maybe in the middle of that struggle, or they've been struggling with it for 10 years. Maybe they've been hurt for 10 years and they're just hoping that the church will turn around. So, I mean, that's kind of my feelings on it. I think that having the outlet is good, but I think it's just like anything else. If you open that door for the outlet, there are going to be people that take it and run with it and just, make it big.
And that's what I've majorly seen on social media. And I'm also a part of the problem too. I love replying with zingers back when someone in the church says something, and I'm just like, they're not going to change, so let me just zing them. But is that really helpful? Is that really something that is helpful? There's one thing that I've learned in friendships and family is trying to, me and Phil have talked about this before, is trying to convert somebody is never, you're never going to be able to do that at all. It's through this right here, through this dialogue of conversing back and forth with each other, that can help, sway that pendulum of thoughts and changes. But again, when you made that comment of I sympathize with them, that really to me resonated, because I had never thought about that. I've been so far on this mission of deconstructing, where I'm like, I'm just trying to change that identity. I'm not in that church right now. I'm trying to deconstruct so I can reconstruct, but I don't want to think about that building anymore. So when you said that, I was like, wow, it really was not that long ago that I was in that building doing the reverse of this. So I need to think about that to be able to help, number one, not just myself, but also the brand of Meet Me at the Table was trying to create, which is meeting people, not just people that are deconstructing, but meeting people where they are, and having these discussions. So kudos to you.
Right. I mean, like the sympathizing part, when you think about it, it's you kind of think about like when someone brought these similar questions up to you when you were really involved in church and you were, not having these questions, like my response was probably similar. I kind of
Yeah.
dismissed it. That's why I said like it encourages dismissive behavior because if it doesn't, if it challenges your faith or it challenges something you believe in, it's easy to just instantly shut that off and be like, well, no, 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 that's just Satan talking. That's just the world trying to influence you.
And that's,
And
I'm
that's
not to
what
interrupt, but
churches
that's not even
encourage.
with religion. That's with kind of with everything nowadays, with
Yeah.
politics,
Right.
with
Oh yeah.
religion, with, whether you like blue or black. I mean, you're onto something. Don't mean to interrupt you, but you're right.
Mhm.
I think the fact that anything gets challenged nowadays gets pushed back in people's faces almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But also,
And
where does that happen? Where is this pushback always happening? It's always social media. It's always through texting. It's never really in person. It's never having these face-to-face conversations. It's changed drastically in this last decade. Of if I have an issue with you, I'm just going to go to social media and throw a zinger, and now I don't like you. Instead of having a face-to-face conversation, saying, "Hey, Craig, I don't agree with you on this stance. Let's discuss it. Can you respect mine and I respect yours?" And just you leave it at that. That doesn't happen anymore, which is sad. But Phil, what was you about to say?
um yeah, in terms of like just being dismissive of contradicting viewpoints, I think social media has kind of flared up that instant dismissiveness
Mm-hmm.
because we see so much different information and different viewpoints so quickly. Like you could just scroll and you're going to see, I mean, especially with my, feed, I see far right crazy, memes, and I see far left crazy memes. I see like sarcastic atheist posts. Like it's just there's a whole spectrum of things, and it's easy to just ignore the ones that don't align with your views and just to call it, evil or wrong or just um, instead of just and easy to like just chime in and be like, nope, you're wrong. Like this is how it should be. Because we all get, keyboard courage. It's easy to sit there and type. You're not, but I think it happens in person too. I mean, we all know the hey, let's go grab a coffee conversations that we know we've been approached with when we start questioning or we start kind of getting out of line
Yeah.
in church and stuff. So like there's also where like they see things that they don't like, so they want to reach out to you to correct these behaviors. And that's when I always bring up like cultish behaviors in churches, not saying churches or Christianity is a cult. We just have cult like tendencies, and it's important to identify those because it doesn't foster um, self-examination. It doesn't foster um, just questioning things on a regular basis and reforming opinions. We're so quick to form an opinion and just to stick to it no matter what, because
Yeah.
it's pride. We all have pride, and there's a lot of people in that post that I had that suffer with a lot of pride, that don't like to admit when they're wrong and don't like to seem vulnerable. And there's just, and it gets to a point in those conversations where I have to just go, okay, well, I can explain I mean, there's a lot of like way out there things uh, that I believe in now that like just they can't even comprehend. And because one guy on there asked me like, okay, well, how do you define a Christian, or what negative things have they done that you say is wrong? And I was like, well, dude, that's a lot to unpack on a
Yeah.
comment thread.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he was like, well, message me if you want. And I was gonna send him like a voice memo and just be like, hey, like I've been on these conversations before, and it's one of those things where like I'm gonna be challenging things that you really don't like even comprehend at this point. There's like a switch that has to flip to where you can start kind of absorbing these
Yeah.
challenges in a more effective way. And because like I would tell him like I question the divinity of the Bible. I don't think the Bible's as divine or as living and breathing as Christians, evangelical Christians say it is. Like I think it's been manipulated and
Yeah.
twisted by other men in the world to keep a certain power in play. So I question certain things of the Bible that I think this might have been skewed to favor a certain group of people.
Mhm.
And like if you start off the bat with that, they're already going to be like, well, if you don't even think the Bible's 100% accurate, then like we can't even have this. And that's why I was like,
Yeah.
that's why I would like try to say that to you, like that's why I know this conversation would ultimately not be super beneficial to either of us.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think honestly, people in that belief, and I'll even go back to my prior life in that belief as well. I think those people in that belief are unwilling to have an open mind, because if they feel it's the crack theorem, if they open the door a crack, it's just going to be open and it's going to stay open. And
Mhm.
two things about that. One, if you're shutting that off, you're not, like you said, you're never going to be able to convert somebody like that. You're never going to be able to open someone's eyes because they're shutting that off completely. Two, if you open that crack, their faith had better be strong enough to allow that crack to open and be able to go back to their faith if they feel that they've seen both sides and they feel that their side is still the right side. If their faith isn't strong enough, they need to question their faith or go ahead and just open the crack up. One of the two. Because at that point, you either believe hard enough and you're willing to listen to both sides, and because you're strong enough in your faith, or you're not really strong enough in your faith and you're just going to close everything off.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's a good way.
That's a really good, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's two different sides of these conversations we can
Yeah.
have. It's, either going to be with someone who's strong in their faith enough to accept challenges,
Yeah.
or there's people that aren't strong enough in their faith that won't. And it's funny because if you say that to one of these people, they will say, well, my faith is incredibly strong. Like I don't question, like, but do you? Because you instantly just want to like put the blame on me for like doing, like I did something wrong. Like that was a common theme in that comment thread. It was like, I made this decision. This, like, you are clearly not doing this. Like, this isn't what God is calling you. Like, you're like, they think they know what God is calling me to.
Well,
And I was trying to, I was like, how do you know what my relationship is with God and what He is calling me to? Like, it's a really bold assumption to assume that I'm just making all these decisions on my own without any, consultation with God or prayer or meditation. It's, yeah.
And I think some of them automatically assume that you're going to question theological basis instead of things the church are doing that are hurting people. I think those
Which is
two things
exactly
are
what that post was.
Yeah, I think those are, when you start challenging people, I think they see one side and not the other.
Yeah.
They don't see the fact
Mhm.
that money's getting used inappropriately at churches, or abuses are getting swept under the carpet, or racial indifferences are blatant in the church. That's really not theoretical challenges. Those are challenges to the hierarchy at a church, not whether Jesus, hated homosexuals. Some that comes into the play at some point in time, but I think that's all they're assuming is we're just going to question their faith. We're going to tell you, oh, you shouldn't believe in God. Oh, you shouldn't believe in Jesus. Oh, you shouldn't be doing things that are in the Bible. That's not okay. Some of those things might fit in that group, but honestly, most of the things we're challenging and talking about don't have to do with the theology. It has to do with the structure of the church and the building
institution
itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I've noticed in these comments, a lot of times when these posts, and again, this is as you mentioned, like in your response, like I was also there. I was responding the way that here I am, kind of like getting frustrated at these people. That was me before, but they're not looking at the picture of what you were posting about and saying that there's these major issues within the church. And if you got down to the root of it, they most likely would agree with all those issues that you were saying, but they would rather
Only if they open the crack.
Correct. But they would rather defend the building rather than look at you and say, "Hey, I could tell you're hurt. Let's have these discussions and let's figure out why you're hurt, and then let's just figure out if
Mhm.
maybe I do believe or agree, or and even if I don't, I respect you enough to take this offline and have a discussion." So all this and to say is that I also need to call myself out on that and do better at that. And when I defend the deconstructing community, I should always look at what was I like prior to this. And maybe I can try to find the happy median here.
Yeah.
But
Because that post also kind of spiraled into like reinterpretations of Bible and stuff too, and that could be a whole other episode of
yeah,
like how interpretations can change and evolve throughout your Christian walk and throughout the history of Christianity. Is we've used the Bible to justify um, wars and genocides and all this kind of stuff, and or slavery even. People use the Bible to defend slavery, and so they're all saying like, well, yes, there's interpret it, but like there's only one truth, or like one, like it was this common thread of like yes but no. Like
yeah,
yes, there's interpretations, but really the Bible is like, it's plain, like they're saying, like, it's plain and simple, and there is one truth to it. And like if you're not like agreeing with that, then you're kind of missing the point of the Bible, is what the main gist of some of those things were. And I'm like, this is just so, it's that closed-mindedness of like, the way we interpret the Bible is correct. We know for sure it's correct. And if you question the interpretation, you're misguided, or you're the
yeah.
one wrong. So, and that's a whole other discussion too,
Yeah.
of like how we interpret the Bible.
I was just going to say, so not to go too far off on that tangent, but
Right.
the Bible is supposedly divine writers who were filled with the Spirit, but
Right.
still, it is a secondhand account. Jesus
And
didn't write
still,
it. Jesus
the
didn't write
Bible,
anything, and God didn't write anything. They didn't physically write
yeah,
anything down. And
the Bible
again,
says that only one man was sinless. So so the
and
people writing could have done something wrong. I mean, we can just look at that and go, maybe they did write something wrong, or maybe it was interpreted 1,000 years prior, or 2,000 years differently as it evolved.
yeah,
At
you're
the
right.
end of
That's
the day,
we could have an entire discussion just on
yeah.
that at that point. So.
Right.
At the end of the day, the man next to Jesus on the cross, the Bible does not say whether he was a Christian or not, but it was alluded that he was not a Christian prior to being on the cross, and he looked over God and accepted him in his heart. There was no question of what he did prior to that. There was no discussions of what his thoughts and beliefs on everything else were. Jesus accepted him into heaven. That's all that really matters in that discussion. And we really get frustrated for a lot of little things. But the biggest thing to me is, can the church and can ourselves, the deconstructing community, can the Christian evangelicals, can we just learn to love people and stop trying to change people? Let's just love better, listen, and change. But
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I know people who hate that phrase too, because they're like, yes, but when we are calling people out, we're doing it in love, or we're doing it because we love them. And it's like,
Ooh.
that's a nice way to say, I just want you to know I think
yeah,
you're wrong.
gaslighting
And a
and
lot of the time,
manipulation is not love.
yeah, and gatekeeping. That's the
Yeah.
big thing, like
Mhm.
gatekeeping Christianity. Like if you're not doing it this way, you don't have it at all.
Yep.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I want to thank you both for jumping on for this quick little just kind of discussion. Again, when I saw that post, I was definitely frustrated, because it's sad to see people look at someone that's hurt and just go, "You're wrong. You don't have the Holy Spirit in you." Blah 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 blah. And then when you made the comments that, "Hey, I sympathize with them because I know what they're going through. I was there too." It was like, you know what? That's a good point to think about. So, hey, if you're listening to this and you sympathize with this discussion, feel free to reach out to any of us on social media or on our Meet Me at the Table Pod Instagram. or meet me at the table podcast@gmail.com. We look forward to doing many more episodes with Phil. So thank you for filling in the gap on this episode. And we'll see you all next week.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.